the different platforms. But good deal. I think we're live. We're live now on both the LinkedIn's live stream as well as Yahoo and Facebook. I'm Rick Brock Cassidy, and Jeremy Potter, who's presently a ghost, but coming on soon. This is Real Friday. So what we do on Real Friday is to talk about all things mortgage, housing, and real estate, and sort of the benefit of my insights and Brock's and Jeremy's is that we come from very different perspectives: legal, technology, innovation, and sort of traditional mortgage banking and mortgage market research, and we're very much ears to the ground in the business. So we're not going to divulge anything that's company confidential, but we certainly have a lot of insights on the industry that a lot of people just simply don't have, or dynamics and movements in the market, both in technology, banking, traditional banking, mortgage banking, and in real estate that a lot of people miss. And I think the difference between those who don't miss those market moves and those who notice the market movement are those who are the more strategic thinkers who prepare their enterprises for just, next day innovations or challenges that confront, mortgage operations or real estate firms or tech firms. So, anyways, so awesome to see you, Brock, and obviously, awesome to not. I mean, I want Jeremy on the line, but sometimes it's a little bit more fun to pick on him when he arrives late. But I'm sure he had something more important to do than the thousands of people that are going to watch this later on. So, the agenda that I sent out, I don't know if you want to change anything around, but I just thought I'd start off with market highlights and what observations or what articles or different trends that you may have noticed over the last week. Obviously, on the mortgage side, I've noticed that rates definitely improved to new lows, right? So it's the lowest level in over 8 weeks, and so it seems like things are trending in the right direction. But were there any highlights that you want to do to highlight here?
Yeah, no, same stuff. The inventory scene still seems really rough in terms of available housing, so that's going to keep being a drag, I think. But the rate environment seems to have gotten, seems to be getting a lot better momentum wise, just in terms of what has been happening with the Fed and adjusting unemployment numbers up a little bit, which will bring rates down a little bit. So yeah, I think we're headed the right direction on rates. I've been at a bunch of conferences and reading a bunch of news from economists the past couple of weeks, and it seems like everyone thinks we're heading back towards 6 to 6.5%, kind of mortgage rates throughout next year. So I think all we can really hope for is that kind of stability of not getting any worse and some sense of stabilization. So yeah, no, all that stuff. I mentioned last week that some of the publicly traded companies in our space seem to be looking a little bit stronger and a little more positive momentum. I know I was hanging out with some Rocket guys this week, and they were happy their stock went up about 20% in a day on Monday with some of the Fed news. So yeah, I think we're getting on marginally on the right side of the rate conversation finally, and like you said, best rates in a few months, and I think biggest rate decline of the year was last week. So the single week decline. So yeah, seeing similar stuff to you, I think. Hey, Jeremy.
Yeah. I wish there was kind of a dynamic applause when people show up on time or late, that we can dynamically applause when they arrive. But
this is our experience. We can do this. We can do this however you want, right? I mean, we could make it dynamic applause. We could make it insults. We could make it whatever we want to do.
I think we have the insults down. The insults we got.
That. Yeah, that's fine.
I just don't have the technical ability to do the applause. I'm trying to think of I found a really good chart that came out that I can show here on the screen, which basically just shows exactly what you just highlighted, Brock. Just as far as the rates, it was the largest decline really this year, especially in the last 8 weeks. And it's given a lot of optimism for a lot of mortgage companies to focus on. Maybe there is light around the corner. There's a number of, outside of just rates, obviously, there's a number of challenging factors in the market. Inventory still is at impressively low. There's only about 500 or 530,000 listings right now across the United States, and I think the typical at this time of year, the typical number is around 1.1, 1.2 million. So there's still, even though the ability or capacity for consumers to get the home that they love and they want to buy, just got a little bit easier. The ability to actually find that home as that problem really hasn't been solved, right? So I think that's, as I talk to various mortgage executives, I talked to a few this morning, and they're not holding their breath, right? They're hoping that this is a good indicator for things to come, but it really doesn't solve the problem of like loan origination volume, the volume that's out there. I was talking about it, vertical versus horizontal, right? We did about 1.6 or so trillion this year. Of course, the forecasts vary between 1.3 to 1.5 for next year. I actually think that we'll be probably at the same rate, perhaps slightly better in 2024 than we were in 2023. But even if it is slightly better, there's still a small amount of volume. That pie has gotten smaller. So the vertical nature of the market hasn't really expanded. And as a result, everyone is just fighting for a bigger piece of that pie as it's carved up. And that's why the recruiting environment is so aggressive. Mortgage companies are becoming a lot more aggressive in their acquisition strategies just to gobble up market share. Because if you can't grow, if the market isn't going to help you vertically, you can grow horizontally in markets where you just simply aren't. And I was, obviously, cross country, we've always been super aggressive. I attribute so much to the company's success to its aggressive nature. But I was talking to another executive from another, top 25 lender, and they're acquiring companies. They're cutting checks. They're cutting anywhere from 50 to 75 basis points of last year's volume. So if you did 500 million last year, you're going to get, a $2 million check or $1.5 million check at a minimum from a negotiating standpoint to close on a deal, to kind of not bail out, but to provide a strategic path forward for companies that may not either have the liquidity to continue or they just don't have the appetite. One company I spoke to has, I don't know, like they had going into this year, they had about 11 or $12 million in their balance sheet in cash. They've burned about 3 of that this year. So now they're down to about 8. And the question that the owner is saying, well, shoot, this is my family's retirement. If I burn another 3 million over the course of the next 6 or 9 months, and I go from 8 down to 6, it becomes kind of a scary proposition because you're losing that kind of cash. You got to notify, Fannie and Freddie and Ginnie. You got to notify a HUD based on negative returns on your audited financials. So I mean, it's a scary kind of proposition if you don't make the right cuts and you don't stop the bleeding, or at least grow your way out of it, right? So if you do nothing, you're going to lose $3 million, right? In this one company's case, if he doubled down and invested in growth and marketing and sales and recruiting, he's going to lose probably another $1 million or $2. So he's going to lose $5 million, however he looks at it, right? So all of a sudden, his balance sheet goes from 8 million down to 3. If he makes the right bet, if he makes the right choices in those recruiting, if those $2 million he allocated toward recruiting bonuses and infrastructure and growing, if they make the right hires, they could climb out of it and rebuild that balance sheet. Jeremy,
Rick, from your perspective, do you see? I do have a question. From your experience, is there any consistency or trends that you're drawing, like across? Because what you're talking about is a business model, specifically the independent mortgage company business model.
Yeah.
And if you add a 0 and it's $80 million in cash, I've got to spend 30 to keep it going, or 15 even to keep it going. It's still the same basic calculation, right? Or I'm asking, are there no real trends that we're going to see over the next year? And it's individualized to the particular owner of the particular mortgage company with their particular balance sheet and set of circumstances that are going to dictate. So does it even
Yeah.
make sense? Because we always see out there on LinkedIn all these people with predictions, but the way you've just described it to me, just real talk on Real Fridays, is like, what's the value of predicting if each one of these companies, they may have the same business model, but they're in their own unique set of family circumstances, capital circumstances,
Yeah.
growth circumstances. So is there any value in trying to predict? Is there any consistency, or is it all one-offs?
So there's a couple questions there, right? One is value and one is consistency. I think there's tremendous value in predicting it because and not just predicting it, but understanding because the behaviors are different. If you're a small to mid-sized mortgage bank, and we'll talk about this later about some of the attrition and some of the companies that have sort of given in to the market pressures. But the reality is, if you have a 200,000 or 300,000 home servicing portfolio, and you have $500 million in the bank, that's a different sort of proposition than a company that only has 8 to 10 million. That barrier to entry has gotten a lot higher for that independent mortgage bank to compete, right? And so as that barrier to entry increases, those companies that you used to be able to grow an independent mortgage bank and have 3, 4, 5, 6, $7 million in the bank. So when people call me and they say, look, we want to raise some capital, my question is, look, you got to be realistic in how much capital you need to raise, number one, right? But if you're sitting on a $500 million balance sheet and you lose $100 million or $50 million, you can cut your way out of that. You can invest in certain areas and cut other areas of fat that you equipped, and we're seeing that in a lot of companies, to be able to navigate to get to the next ride. That question isn't so much, am I going to survive? The question is, what adjustments do I need to make to the enterprise to make it to the survive to 25 kind of mentality. So that's number one. Size of your organization is number one. Number two, of your total production volume. Number two, the talent of your leadership. If you have good talented leadership that can manage, enterprises, I think you can manage your way through this. A lot of mid-market mortgage companies don't have the talent, right? And they're overcompensated from a financial standpoint. And so that's number two. Number three, the average age of the average owner of the average mortgage company is like 62 years old, right? So a lot of those guys are looking at, like, what do I do? Do I have it in me? Like one owner I spoke to, he's like, I don't know if I have it in me for the next 10-year run. Sure. I have a few $1 million in the bank. I could retire and do something different. So that's motivating a lot of acquisitions. And I would say Ford technology is really stretching thin, because you see the companies like UWM and even Cross Country, who have young owners who are very aggressive in technology. Cross Country has some of the best technology I've ever seen, quite frankly. And there's a few of them. There's a few companies out there that do, but they're run by younger ownership, by younger CEOs, to be honest with you. And younger meaning early 40s to mid 50s to late 50s. It's kind of that, because it really does. Your connection to technology drops off pretty hard when you at that 60 and up kind of. There's always exceptions to every rule, but I'm talking about just the trends that you're talking about, right? So to me, those are the four things.
Yeah, those are the four things. I'm also kind of hearing you say a little bit like there's a mindset shift between someone who says, this is what's happening in the market, I'm going to take advantage of it, or this is a cycle, been through cycles before, and here's another one. Because that second mindset to me feels a little bit less like I'm going to do anything differently and more like I understand cyclicality, I'm riding this out, versus somebody who sees this cycle, maybe either hasn't been through one. I mean, I can be candid, Brock and I haven't, like one like this, right? Well, when you joined the industry in 2012, I'm pretty sure rates have only dropped since then, with maybe a blip.
Pretty good living these last 10 years.
2018. Yeah, exactly. So versus seeing this moment in the market and being like, okay, it's time to do something different, or it's time to gain ground, or it's time to you could see how those would affect both reasonable conclusions, but one affects the other.
The only, and I'll turn this to Brock next, but the only difference that a lot of CEOs who lived through, there was the original run up. I mean, from 2000 to 2007, and then there was the collapse of 2008 and 9, and then there was sort of the market readjustment from 2010 to 2013, and then we had a kind of a rate, some attrition in the market in the summer of 2013, and then things were sort of okay but flat to stable to 18, and then 18 kind of cratered, and then 19 and 20 really took off. 19 was a much better year than we thought, and then 2020 were insane, and 21 were insane. And 23 has been kind of a correcting year. So for those of us who've been that were in those cycles, we're used to the cycles. The problem is, in the words of one executive, he said, "Rick, this is a much different cycle. It's a much longer cycle, right? And longer cycles mean you got to burn more cash, or you really got to cut back. You really got to cut it down. And with innovations in technology, and there's kind of like two whammies to this. One is innovations in new technology that's putting a lot of pressure on the marketplace. Companies like Better and others, from an online lead gen standpoint, are kind of figuring it out on how to make mortgages faster, better, easier, and more efficient from an online lead gen standpoint. And the third piece I'd say is is wholesale. I mean, it's one thing to kind of have a $1.6 trillion market, or a 1.8, in like we saw in like 2018 and 19 and so on. But wholesale was 11, 12, 13% of the market. Now it's pushing 30% of the market. And that's putting a lot of pressure on retail mortgage banks as well. So it's a different, if you're an IMB, even though the IMB is still the lion's share of all originations made, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on companies doing under $1 billion, without a doubt. And if you're under 600 million, it's a heat gradient. The smaller you are, the hotter it gets to the center of, being really small.
And it's a lot less fun to run one of those small lenders if you thought you were going to retire in a year or two, I imagine,
Well, yeah.
To have the last year or two that you were planning on working be ones where you're burning millions instead of making millions.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk a little bit later in the agenda, but around, banks and mortgage companies that have exited the business in the last year. I had mentioned Shamrock Home Loans out of East Providence, Rhode Island. It was a good little company, good little, sort of regional, player. Pretty much all of its volume were in East Providence, Rhode Island. And the problem is with the organization is it lacked talent, it lacked, technology, and the organization really succumbed to a lot of the market pressures. So as they grew and added loan officers, all of them left, or a good number of them left, the people who were joined in the last couple of years. So with a few exceptions, to be fair, for sure. But the reality is, when you're losing staff and you're losing loan officers, you have a much older sort of owners, profile. It's the reality is you can't survive. Let me put it this way. In my view, in Real Fridays, you can't survive as a regional lender. You have to grow. You got to grow geographically and horizontally to diversify your income streams and your geographic streams of business. If you don't, I don't see you surviving in this market. I really don't. Unless you just want to be a small IMB, and that's fine. There's plenty of those, but it is very, very, very difficult to operate with secondary compliance and accounting and HR and all the infrastructure. The first 20 million in most mortgage banks pretty much covers your overhead. You could squeeze that down to 15 or 16 million. But if you're an IMB, an independent mortgage bank, your break-even point is right around 15, 16, 17 million, without any doubt. It depends on what your mix of business is. But if you're not doing 16, 17 million, a minimum, you're making $0. You're breaking even. And then, in that 25, 30 million, you're making a little bit of money. But is it worth given the risk you're taking with buybacks and so on, and lawsuits and different things? So it's a pretty complicated calculus, if you know what I mean. So
You were
go ahead.
You were
Jeremy?
quoted in an article this week. About the missing middle of like the IMB market. It seems like the definition you just laid out is kind of that's where the heat is hottest, so to speak,
Oh yeah.
is like that. Because if you're a bank, you have much more control over levering up or down your mortgage operations, I think. Um, Especially the way licensing works and that type of thing. You could turn it on if you needed to, so to speak,
Yeah.
with some people in house versus what you're saying. So, but we've also heard a lot over the years of different categories of people in this industry are gone, right? Mortgage broker was one, real estate agent at different times, including now. Oh, they're under threat, and not a lot changes. So I guess the question would be like, is there anything we should be looking at or that I should be watching over the next like 6 to 8 months? Because you sent out a list to us, and I think you put this agenda on LinkedIn so everybody can see it, of like people leaving or changing or whatever. But none of that was like earth shattering.
Yeah.
Names or decisions. So I was just curious, like anything you're watching to say, like, oh, this is a very different situation than last time, or this is a contagion for this particular type of business model.
Well, and I call it the collapse of the middle class, the middle class mortgage bank, and quite frankly, the middle class, the small regional depository. The reality is originating loans is an expensive endeavor. It's grown more expensive, and in a rising rate environment with limited inventory, and you have a kind of a contracted production volume level from a national standpoint. It's just extremely competitive in today's environment. And those with more cash, I mean, all you have to do is look at the balance sheets of the top 50 lenders in the United States. I mean, they're very well capitalized institutions, and then there's kind of everyone else. Okay, so the collapse of the middle class is real, and I hate to see it. I hate to see companies like Shamrock. I think what they did is they ended up getting absorbed by CMG. Basically, the origination assets ended up getting absorbed into CMG, and that becomes kind of the last check that the owner gets or the owners get, and then they sail off into their sort of protective environment, and then everyone else is sort of left scrambling, and that's what happens with a lot of these mortgage companies. But it's good for the originators because then a company like CMG or others can provide a good lifeline, a good healthy platform for some of the loan officers. Why? Because it's better managed, better technology, more capital to support the few loan officers that are left. So it's bittersweet because my father ran a real estate agency and a mortgage company, and my mom worked in the offices, and my sisters and siblings worked in the office as well. And I liked that period of that mortgage era of the 90s and the 2000s. To me, it's a more wholesome era because you're doing, you're lending to neighbors. And back in the day when a lot of these companies were started, you could survive like that. You can't survive like that anymore, and it's clear. You companies like Shamrock and others who've tried to sort of grow out of their regional pocket. It takes leadership, it takes technology, it takes capital. And if you don't have those three things, you're going to add a few outside, you're going to dip your toe in the water outside of your market, and then you're going to not be able to support those people. They're going to leave. Typically, the regional player says, well, they weren't a good fit. And then they go about their way, but they simply don't grow out of their pocket. Market researchers call it the ditch. Once you get into that ditch, it's hard to get out of it. And the only way to get out of it is by capitalizing your way to hire the right leadership to do it. But companies like that just simply don't have the stomach for it or didn't have the capital for it and or the culture to do it. So, and those aren't negative things. Those are just market realities with these companies. Companies that have really success, and I'll be honest with you, tools like yours, Brock, with NewZip, that's a good example of a technology that bridges a gap that a lot of mortgage companies need, right? Between, so you really retain the relationship with the realtor. It creates a more sticky kind of relationship. A lot of small to mid-sized companies either need a solution like that, if they're tech savvy enough to think that they do. Because if they don't adapt to solutions like yours and others, I think, or even like, yeah, if they don't adapt, I think that they're done.
Yeah. I mean, we obviously our sweet spot has been, national consumer direct platforms that want us to, find an agent, a top local agent for every deal, want us to help run the whole process. But to your point, an emerging trend we're seeing, Jeremy's heard me talk about this ad nauseum, is, and we may disagree on the exact words, but it's kind of like the consumer direct model and the retail model are getting a little bit closer together. We're at these like expansionist retail offices where they're going to open up either literally new branches or just get new licenses. Instead of being licensed in 2 states, they're going to get licensed in 5 states. It's that, I think, horizontal growth we're talking about. So my calendar has been pretty full of what you would consider classic retail, but like, very expansion oriented retail.
Yeah.
So they're going into a market where they don't have those long tenured local relationships, where they share an office with a realtor, or where they, go to coffee every morning with a realtor or whatever. So they need a platform like ours in order to sort of launch that new market or expand geographically. So, we have plenty of partners like that where they're based in 1 state, but they're licensed in 12, and they use us for every deal in the other 11 and some deals in the home state, right? So we're seeing that pretty often. It is an interesting trend, but I think that's a good way to survive is to find those other bits of business around other niches and other parts of your state, other states, et cetera.
Well, and that's the thing, Jeremy, you've been on the forefront of tech innovation and certainly, especially on the fulfillment side with title and other fulfillment services around the closing of the loan. And it's hard to get a small to regional player. If a small regional player said, look, we'll invest in the product and the direction, it seems like that's a much harder sale than companies that really need the efficiency at scale.
Yeah, I think the way that you both laid it out just there makes a ton of sense, which is you want to be able to pick your thing and then test it out in the best, most financially reasonable way. And then when you find it, expand it, pour gas on it. I think, Rick, what you described earlier is the big risk these guys fall into a lot is expansion means doing more things like, oh, well, now I'll do some brokering. I'll broker some loans and I'll lend on some loans, or I'll add, I don't know what size you'd have to be, but I'll add some correspondent, or maybe I should be doing servicing now. Like trying to add those component pieces seems to me to be a mistake. Meaning you're trying to do more things that are expansive to your business, but they're not things that are coherent and cohesive with both short-term and long-term growth, unless you really are going to be one of the top 30 and figure out a path to get there, or top 50 or whatever. To Brock's point, to what you were just asking, yeah, let's use the tools that expand what we want to be good at in the way we want to do it. And then the expansion can be relatively normal or natural. So for instance, if you think purchase is a way to stay relatively insulated from rate fluctuations, great. What's the thing? What's going to be your purchase strategy? If you need a partner to get into 11 states, then what's your plan for taking over each of those additional states and beyond? And then all of a sudden you turn around and in a year or two, you are now a 15-state digital lender with these tools. But that's your thing. Like that, I think, is a much stronger expansion and wallet share play right now, market share play, than maybe I should open up a renovation division, which is funny because I'm all for product development. Like I love new product and I love expanding new product, but you can't just do it randomly because the market is what it is. It has to be coherent with what your technology does and what you want to be good at for a long time to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What the Lending Tree Tech Award? So tell us about that. How did you guys pull that off? How did you guys?
Yeah, congratulations, man.
Yeah, congrats.
I'm gonna show up late and drop early. So as I drop in the middle of Brock celebrating the Lending Tree Innovation Award, don't be afraid. Just keep going. But congratulations.
Who needs competitors?
Congratulations.
Partners like this. But yeah, so the Lending Tree Summit. So Lending Tree for many years, kind of before the financial crisis, I guess, really had been doing this annual summit where they bring their top X number of lenders and some companies that they think are innovative and kind of put the two together in a small room and have various panels and pitches and stuff like that. They stopped for about 10 years, and they did the first one again last year, which was a little bit smaller.
That goes to show you of like the status of like mortgage technology, right? It just stopped for 10 years.
Literally,
you stopped celebrating mortgage technology. Go ahead.
Pretty much. So they did it last year, and NewZip. I wasn't with NewZip at this time last year, but NewZip did go and did a panel and kind of got in, made some friends and alliances within the Lending Tree family, both some of their partners as well as some of the people inside Lending Tree. So we just kind of had a live discourse with them over the past year. So that this year, what they did is they invited a little bit bigger group to Charlotte. There was some stuff at their office. There was some stuff. The actual event itself was at the NASCAR Hall of Fame, which was a surprisingly cool place.
Where was that? In Charlotte, or where was it?
In Charlotte, yeah, right in downtown Charlotte.
That's awesome.
Kind of a cool place. But yeah, so the way it worked was it was this full day event with a bunch of panels. Like Barry Habib gave a presentation on rates and how to sell in this market and grow in this market, stuff like that. But throughout the whole day, they interspersed. I think they called them innovation showcases or innovation challenge pitches or something like that. There were about 10, mostly startups. Funny enough, CoreLogic was one of them with one of their new products. Snowflake, the huge cloud provider, was one of them with a new fintech product. So we were pitching against some real heavyweights in addition to some other startups. And then there was kind of open voting on what there were a few different criteria, like which ones do you think would be valuable to you as a lender in this market. There's a few different ways you could vote. We won. But NewZip won the popular vote with both our core platform, but we also teased some new features around how we're gonna go higher in the funnel and help incubate leads with lenders from day one, and maybe help lenders generate leads. So that's kind of an additional twist to our agent matching part of our platform. So that landed really well. It was a really cool event. We got a number of partnership conversations out of it. A number of things we could do directly with Lending Tree as well. So it was a fun event for us.
So people voted right then and there, just strictly based on the pitch and what they heard.
Yeah.
That's good for you guys. I mean, that's what you want to do, right? I mean, you want to, it's almost like no politics involved. It's here's the pitch. People are assessing the value proposition, and then they're saying, this is great.
And it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny. There were 2 or 3 judges who were different industry analysts and stuff like that. And we did not win their judging. We won the popular vote of the actual lenders, the attendees. So I guess that's who's going to buy our product. So we'll take it. But it was kind of funny that we didn't think we were going to win because the judges rated us fine, but not first. And then the popular vote in the room, we won that one.
You'll have to tell me who the judges were. I can look it up because I'll be able to tell you why. Just based on who the judges were, but look, I would say that, look, congrats, man. I love it. And just like any presidential administration, any activities that occur prior that end up sprouting some fruit under your watch means you get to claim credit. So I actually credit the success to you, Brock. So I think Addie should know this.
I don't totally agree, but I will certainly accept it. Audie did most of the pitch itself. He did a great job. He's a good showman.
Yeah. Well, we met with Audie a couple weeks ago, and I was super impressed with his story and the reason for which he started the company. So I think that's great. So congratulations.
Thanks.
We'll have to showcase Jeremy's company, Title Look, because I know his leadership on the title tech side has been really, really strong. And I'd love to learn more about it. And I'd love for our listeners or people who watch the program to learn more about it, because pretty much whatever Jeremy does, he does really, really well, and he leads it well. So I'm excited to learn more about the title of platform that he's now the president of.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think he's kept it a little bit under wraps as they're kind of getting some of their first like really large deals going. But yeah, I think it's time for him to bring it to Real Fridays.
Yeah. The other piece of the agenda that I said is mortgage companies exit the business amidst challenging market. In my view, this is way more than just a trend or a blip. I'd said Shamrock Home Loans, amidst a year of losing staff and loan officers, transferred their assets over CMG, which was probably long overdue for a lot of these types of mid-market sort of players. Citizens exits wholesale. Homestar closed their retail platform. Now they're getting sued by Flagstar. I think over I don't know, it's probably their pipeline and current lock commitments and stuff. Fifth Third exits wholesale. Flagstar pulls back their retail platform to really circle around their parent company. It's a bank on where their core lending footprint is. So they pulled back, and I know a lot of people from Flagstar who've left.
So is that their entire mortgage operation, and they're just doing the other bank?
Well, it's their retail. Their entire retail, because they're in wholesale and they do correspondent stuff.
Right.
But there's an article, and this happened probably about 6 months ago or so, that really describes what the basis for which they're making these adjustments in the way of saving money. And so they just basically retreated from certain geographic footprints where their retail platform was to really focus on a more tighter footprint for retail. Wells Fargo pulled back in retail. People's Bank of Commerce and the First National Bank of Long Island exits retail. And then Santander Bank exited residential lending altogether. And then Republic Bank just announced today that they exited the mortgage lending business as a whole. So it's a radical shift in the space, where it's a non-depository space. It's brokers and independent mortgage banks are growing to be probably more than 2/3 of all mortgages that are closing, and we're going to see a lot of consolidation. I think probably close to 20 to 30% of independent mortgage banks are either going to go out of business or they're going to get acquired or absorbed by better capital, by just better capital, better leadership kind of companies, similar to what we saw with Shamrock and CMG. But it's I don't blame owners who basically sell out like that, because it especially given your age, if you're 65 years old or 68 years old or whatever it is, and you don't want to make the investments in new relationships, new leaders for the next 10 years, I don't blame the tendency or the desire to kind of just wash your hands of it and move on. I really don't.
No, I mean, I totally get it. And all these banks have enough other stuff going on and liquidity concerns and everything else that I think banks are always kind of a little bit handicapped with mortgage. So it's not shocking to see a little bit of pullback. But one of the things that I found interesting that wasn't on our agenda here, but in the same vein, it seems like there's a decent amount of consolidation on the servicing, like the MSR side as well. I noticed that NewRez is buying a bunch of different books of business specifically. I think, and I think a handful of other groups too. So that was actually almost more surprising to me, where the servicing is supposed to be the lucrative part right now, isn't it? So it's kind of interesting to see that consolidating.
Well, I think that the consolidation, you almost see this accordion flow of consolidation that occurs in these cycles. So I don't disagree with you. Servicing is an interesting business because the liquidity requirements are high, and and right now it's what Guaranteed Rate sold a lot of their servicing, which in my view, from what I hear on the street, has kind of destabilized a little bit of the organization, because it really hamstrings your capital to weather markets like this. And I've seen this. I know APM, a really, really good company. They sold a lot of their servicing going into this year, and I'm sure they wish that they hadn't. But everyone's got their strategy. I mean, these are companies that have been around for a long time. Victor's been very successful. The guys who founded American Pacific, that it's an ESOP, an employee owned organization. They've done very, very well. They're climbing in the top 25, I think, really successfully. So it's interesting. I know, from a cross country standpoint, we have a very large servicing portfolio in the hundreds of thousands of homes. So it creates a tremendous amount of stability for the organization. And I credit the founder of Ron of Cross Country for his decision to really take this business and take it seriously. Oftentimes when people always think that you can build your servicing platform when you're big, and companies like Ron and others decided to build their servicing portfolio when they were small and then to grow it as you got big. And that's almost the only successful way of doing it, without a tremendous amount of cash. So I agree with you. There's going to be a lot of attrition. I know of one servicing deal that's going on right now, about $500 million or so in servicing. People are liquidating just to make the cash if they're not doing mortgages. But no, look, man, I think we're, as we enter in the Thanksgiving holiday, what are you doing next week?
Yeah, I'm going to be heading back to I'm heading back to Maine for a couple of days for Thanksgiving, for a little longer for Christmas. So I'll be going up there twice in the next month or so. So that'll be fun. Just see some snow probably. It's already been snowing a good amount there. Maybe fit in some skiing or snowshoeing depending on it. What about you? You going to Vermont?
Snowshoeing is literally the most Maine thing you've ever said. I love that.
Just hiking around in the snow with some big shoes.
No, I'm gonna have my kids. I'm super excited. And so we're gonna do Thanksgiving and in Massachusetts. So we're gonna stick close. And it did snow a couple times over the last two weeks, but we've gotten an early snow. I think we're gonna get hammered this year for snow. There's the forecast is some pretty heavy precipitation in Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine.
Might be able to actually do some skiing in the east this year. That'll be fun.
I think it'd be great. We'll have to do that. We'll have to do a real Fridays from one of the ski resorts, Sugarloaf in Maine, or up in Stowe, Vermont, or something like that. I think
that sounds good. That sounds good. All right, Rick.
Yeah. Good chatting with you, man. Thank you everybody for joining. Michael Keller, thank you for the article here. We'll post this in the as I post it.
I haven't read that yet. I want to read that as well. Cool.
So thank you guys. We'll appreciate you, and we'll see you next week.
See you, Rick.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.